Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and knock this out. Alright, first question. Hey Jason, read an article by Greg Nuckols advocating for the trap bar deadlift over conventional if it's sports specific. I train as a sprinter and have started to implement them, even doing touch and go based on training from my coach. Was curious what you thought about this. Thanks. Touch and go, no, touch and go deadlifts I don't think are a good thing. I'm going to recommend you not do that. You really need to reset. And I don't know how to stress that enough. Again, I think touch and go is dangerous. I've covered that over and over and over, and there's no benefit to doing it. You don't get any advantage over the touch and go from doing actual pause and resetting each rep. But when we start talking about sport-specific stuff, I think Greg has a point there. I've said that in the past myself a few times, that I think there are a lot of athletes who would benefit from the trap bar over the conventional deadlift, depending upon what your sport is and everything else. And a lot of it has to do with lower back fatigue, right? It has to do with lower back fatigue. It gives you a different low back angle. And that's fine, because certain people don't want the extra fatigue in their spinal erectors and everything else from the different back angle, because you are pulled forward more on a conventional deadlift instead of the trap bar, as far as, again, the low back angle. But the question becomes, are you trying to maximize lower back strength and development with all of it? So that's why I think for the general lifter, I tend to recommend the normal deadlift. I tend to recommend it anyways, because you actually want to strengthen your lower back as much as possible. But yes, there are a lot of athletes that really don't want the additional fatigue. There may not be a benefit. And so, yeah, like a lot of field athletes, I tend to agree that the trap bar deadlift has its place over the conventional, depending on what they're trying to do. And I'm not saying you can't get the exact same results with conventional. You probably can. It's just that from a fatigue management perspective, given that they're doing so much other practice and sprinting and field work and whatever, that I can see the place for the trap bar. So I don't think it's a bad idea at all. All right, next question. Hi coach, is it okay if I do deadlift as my first exercise on the days I have deadlifts? I'm currently running your novice program, and I'm at the last stages of the novice phase. I'm absolutely fried after 3x5 on squats, so it's very hard to progress on the deadlift. And I lose reps sometimes on the deadlift, even though squats and other exercises get stronger. I feel like if I switched the deadlift to my first exercise on the B workouts, I would progress a lot faster. I lose about 10 kilograms or more on my deadlift when I do them after squats. My current maxes on the squat is 135 kg, and deadlift is about 160 to 165. On a fresh day where I only do one of them as my first exercise. Before I did your novice program, I did 3x5 with 155 kg on the deadlifts before I did a 3x8 on squats. But now I only do 145 kilograms for reps on the deadlift after squats. What's the problem? Are you trying to win a deadlift competition every time you're at the gym? I don't understand. We put deadlifts further into some of these full body programs because they're taxing, because they're fatiguing, and because they do work the lower back hard. What ends up happening if you do deadlifts first, your lower back can get fatigued, and it can become the limiting factor on your other lifts. Furthermore, it's so fatiguing to your nervous system that, again, it can also reduce your ability to perform any other exercise that day. So if you do deadlifts first, you might as well not even bother with the other stuff. You're going to have all of your lifts go down. What you need to remember with the deadlift, though, if you're fatigued already and you're doing the deadlift, you're still getting a training response. In other words, let's say normally you could do 160 kilograms for 5 reps. But if you're doing it as part of a full body workout, and it's the 3rd or 4th or 5th exercise into your day, which is what you see me do personally, right? That's what I do. And you find you can only do 140 or 145 instead, guess what? You still get a training response. You don't have to be fresh to deadlift. The deadlift is a difficult exercise. As long as you're pushing even a remotely high rate of perceived exertion, you're going to get a training response. It isn't that critical that you do it fresh, right? It's not that critical that you do it fresh. And I mean, this is something I even tell powerlifters. They need to train the deadlift behind other lifts so that they get used to being tired when they do it for meets, because they'll deadlift fresh and they'll pull 600 in the gym, and then what happens, they get to a meet and all of a sudden they bomb out on 575, and then they can't figure out what went wrong. It's like, well, because you're not used to training the deadlift fatigued. But seriously, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just leave it later in the program. You'll be tired, or you can't progress as well on it, or you feel like you won't, but eventually you will get strong enough on it that your fatigued deadlift will continue to go up as well with progression over time. I think you're overthinking it. You're over worrying about it because you're concerned with winning a performance every time you're at the gym instead of training and getting a training response. You need to lose that mindset. We're in the gym to build strength, not demonstrate it. All right, next question. Hi Jason, what are your thoughts on 531 as a way to break through plateaus for a low mid-range intermediate? I don't think that would be a good choice for breaking a plateau at all. 531 isn't a particularly volume intensive program. It's not really doing a lot in terms of pushing, overreaching or anything. So no, I don't understand why you would use it to break through a plateau. Now, if you want to go run 531 as an intermediate for 6 months or a year, I think it can be a perfectly fine program for general strength buildup. For general strength building, 531 is a good overall program depending upon what templates you run with it. Meaning I think that you need to definitely be doing more big exercises for the back off work and accessory work, or however you want to program it. And you look at a lot of those templates for it, I think a lot of those work really, really good. And like I said, I don't think it's a bad program at all. I've known people who got good results on it. I've known people who didn't. But as far as if you're actually plateaued, and you need to adjust your current programming. You need to figure out why you're plateauing. If it's an issue of not hitting your minimum effective volume, if it's a recovery issue, but most likely you need more training load. And 531, the way that it's written, is not a particularly high workload program. It's a very baseline program, and then depending on what you do for the template and accessories, can change that, but it inherently wouldn't be anywhere near my first choice for what to do to break through a plateau. But if you want to run the program as an intermediate for 6 months or something, I think it's perfectly fine. You'll probably get good results on it if you train hard. So again, your question is kind of, it's not necessarily a criticism of 531, but no, it wouldn't be what I would use to break through a plateau. You need to do some sort of overreaching and work on your recovery if you've been stuck somewhere for several months. All right, next question. What are your thoughts on the push-pull 4-day split? Also, can your intermediate programs be applicable to a push-pull split if one doesn't want to do upper lower? The push-pull split isn't particularly a split. That's just the way you're choosing to organize things for your own psychological purposes. Here's what you need to understand. There is no physiological reason really why you run a split routine. All right, we run split routines to help with boredom, to give ourselves mental organization, because as people we tend to put placebo value in complexity. All right, we put placebo value in complexity. If it's more complex, it will probably work better, right? That's why we do splits. So that's what I think about it. But that being said, upper lowers are popular, and that's why I wrote like my intermediate is one, because of the popularity of doing it and people grasp the concept better. But I mean, if I was going to talk about splits as an ideal situation, if you insist on not doing a full body, yeah, I would actually lean in that direction. I think the push-pull is probably better because we're focusing on movement patterns instead of body parts. And I usually do think that that's the better way to go for overall development and performance particularly. And we know performance and development go hand in hand when you aren't using large amounts of anabolic drugs. So I think that's perfectly acceptable. If you wanted to run my intermediate upper lower and you wanted to change it to push-pull instead, and for people get confused, the difference between push-pull legs is that your squats would go into a push day because you're pushing. So push would actually be all your pressing, all your squatting, all that stuff, right? And pulls would be all of your deadlifting, hip hinges, so even if you're going to power clean and stuff, that would go into the pull days, right? all your pull-ups, chin-ups, rows, all that stuff. That's pull. Whereas in push would be all your pressing and squatting. For anyone who's confused. But yeah, no, I think that's fine. If you wanted to split it up that way instead, I think you'll get just as good a results. And I would actually really recommend that if you had to. If it's organized the way that it is because of the popularity of it, for it being less weird for people who aren't familiar with movement pattern splits. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.